So continuing from a foundation of basic skill and from confidence that we can do this, we take up the practice, being as honest with ourselves and each other as we can be. And then what follows in the sutta is a basic group of both behaviors and characteristics that are very supportive of the practice. And you might say, you might be thinking, well, why not talk about this 5 days ago, right at the beginning? Well, I sort of did. I spoke of Sila. But now is actually a good time to remind ourselves of this, right in the middle of this Metta retreat. Because this is a time in the retreat when maybe we've hit a plateau or, we want to go a little deeper and we're not sure how to go about that. So it's helpful to reflect about supportive conditions for going deeply. And one thing I want to take note of as a general observation right now at the outset of what I'm going to say is something more about the sutta itself as a heads up about, the framework of it and where it's going. So the Metta Sutta, actually it's interesting. When you first look at it, you think it's all over the place. It seems to bounce around between this, and then it talks about dosa, and then it talks about this, and that. It's like, huh? It's puzzling. But actually, when you begin to look at it, it's quite coherent. Right in those first 2 lines, remember we talked about skill, and how skill was very closely related to knowing wholesome from unwholesome. This is one of the most important aspects of right view as a factor of the Eightfold Path. So the Eightfold Path has 3 basic parts, and these are mirrored in the Metta Sutta. So there's the Sila aspect of the Eightfold Path, right speech, right action, right livelihood. There's the Samadhi aspect, the practice aspect of the Eightfold Path, which is right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. Then there's the wisdom aspect. So in the Metta Sutta, all of those follow one after the other. And that introduction, this is what is done by one who's skilled in what's good and who reaches for that most peaceful state. That most peaceful state being Nibbana. That's coding for, okay, now this is what follows. So anything in the practice, from basic insight to Nibbana, is realized by following a coherent path, not by wandering around or doing a little of this and a little of that. It kind of makes me chuckle because there's an expression in English, cherry picking. Yeah, it's not what we do here at Pienda Chilieji. We don't cherry pick the practice here. We just do one thing. Cherry picking means you take a little from this tradition that you like and a little from that tradition that you like and a little over here and a little over there, and you have this hodgepodge of practice that doesn't really go anywhere. So these first 3 verses, basically it's all about the first aspect of the Eightfold Path, Sila. Well, the first active aspect of the Eightfold Path. But Sila in a very broad general sense, because you can consider it as more than just the precepts. I like to think of Sila as a basic generosity of spirit. And it's, when we are in a bubble of what I want, what I need, the fist is very tightly closed. But it's that beginning of opening that clenched fist. Thinking about how our actions, how our behavior in the world affects other beings. It's basic common sense kindness. So in the sutta, the first, it doesn't follow the precepts. It doesn't say, okay, follow these precepts. It doesn't do that so explicitly. It speaks more in terms of behavior that results when we follow the precepts. Going at the very beginning, straight to the hardest precept, which is right speech. So Suvacho, vacha is speech. Su is the prefix, meaning beautiful or good. So you could literally translate that first word in that line as good speech or kind speech. In the Amaravati translation of the English chant that we sometimes do, it's gentle in speech, which I actually like a lot. It has that feeling of kindness. And in English, well spoken, in this case, it doesn't have anything to do with being able to speak articulately or with good vocabulary. It's not about that aspect of speech. It's about the heart aspect of speech. The essence of suvacho, of kind speech, is not harsh and really not coarse. And bringing the metta attitude into our speech. I don't think I have to remind anybody how difficult this can be. It's one thing around here. It's another thing at a workplace or in a difficult conversation or when somebody's done something that's made us angry to bring in metta. But bringing metta into speech is actually, when you look at the Buddha's guidelines about whether to speak or not, metta is what we call in English the deal breaker. Whether there's metta or not is what determines whether we keep our mouth shut or not. So what we have to say, it could be true, it could be useful, it could be a good time to say it, but if we don't have metta, just keep our mouth shut. So, well spoken. It's not actually very easy. And you're lucky here because noble silence. Not speaking is a blessing because we can't make mistakes when we stay silent. we can't mess up that part about metta if we stay silent. Except what I really want to say is in the context of retreat, suvacho means noble silence. It's not so much here, but in big retreat centers like at IMS in the States, there's a bulletin board near the office. And sometimes it feels like this is yogi TV. Every time people come out of the meditation hall, they look at the bulletin board to see if there's a new note, or maybe a note for them, or maybe they want to post a note to the office. And so this can be a real exercise in suvacho, writing a note. And it can be really obvious from the outside when it's missing, when the goodness, the metta in the speech is missing. So the front office at IMS, or at least when I worked there, if you went in there during the 3-month retreat, there'd always been, the manager would always have a bunch of notes on their desk. And sometimes they would be quite funny, unintentionally funny. Dear front office, this other yogi is really bothering me because they're walking really, really heavily, and please let them know this is a problem. With metta. It sounds better in Italian. Yeah, and it's funny from the outside, but when you write one of those notes, you have I fortunately have never written a note like that, but when people do, they've totally lost touch with the awareness of the fact that there's so much annoyance in the mind that there actually isn't a lot of metta in that speech. So here in retreat, take care, not just with how you speak to yourself, which we talked about last night, but also what you want to say to others. How are you intending to say that? So Elsa hasn't told me anything about dramas, so actually I think everybody's pretty right down the line on this, suvacho. The next bit I like a lot. It's really juicy. And it really goes to the essence of what we do here. Practicing kindness and cultivating loving kindness without too much pride. So the word here in Pali is anatimani. So you might recognize as the last part of that word, the word mana, which most people are familiar with. And what that means basically, anatimani, means an extremely strong construction of self. So mana in Pali means, the technical word is conceit. And that's actually different than the everyday use of the word. It basically means comparing oneself to someone else as better than, worse than, or equal to. So we posit a sense of self, or we, have this solid sense of self, and I'm better than, or I'm worse than, or I'm the same as. So that sense of mana is embedded in this word. But anatimani actually means more of a sense, a really strong, puffed up sense of me, both in the sense of basic pride, but also much more subtly in how we relate to everyone around us. We inhabit a sense of self in a conventional way all the time. I mean, every moment, mostly, when we're not practicing. And this is actually quite subtle, and I don't mean that in a sense of self in a narcissistic way, but just a functional, psychological sense of self that we inhabit as people. And then we take that and build on it. We take it seriously. This is like, rather than something functionally important. And because the metta practice enters the doorway of the Dhamma through conventional reality, guess what we get to see? It's not hard to imagine. We see this sense of self over and over and over again, and how it manifests in really unwholesome ways. My practice. That person is sitting like a rock and I'm just useless. We compare ourselves to the person next to us. We see the world around us on retreat through mistaken perceptions of this sense of self that we solidify. So we're a worse yogi than them, or we're a better yogi than them, or we're all equal, or however we perceive our practice as compared to other people around us, or even more kind of complicated, we compare ourselves to ourselves on a previous retreat. Or we look at this list in these first 3 paragraphs and we say to ourselves, I'm the one with too much pride, or not, I'm not a proud person. We have perceptions of this self that actually none of that is true. Maybe in the moment this body is moving more than that body, but nothing stays the same one moment. There is no self here or self there. There's just mind and body changing conditions. And to understand that in conventional reality we need to have a coherent sense of self, that's just a way of moving through the world. But what the metta practice shows us is how we take all of that way too seriously. And it's very painful. And the spotlight of this practice shows us all of that in so much detail. And the spotlight of this metta practice, particularly because I think of it, the metaphor I think of is you have a cellar or a basement that you haven't gone into for a very long time. You open the door, you turn on the light, you go downstairs and you go, oh, I had no idea this was all down here. And the metta practice is like the torch. It's like the light beam that shows us everything. It's like we see it all. But it's so good because how much better to see it than to be in delusion about the fact that it's not there. So it gives us the opportunity to notice, to understand, just by basic observation as we're going along in the metta practice. How did I just construct a self there? We see that. We also get to see what happens if we believe it. Those are those places in the practice that feel awful. It's like, oh, we're full of kilesa because that sense of self is very strong. And as I was talking about last night when I spoke of skill, it gives us the opportunity to learn how to be with it so as not to feed it. So we learn to hold it lightly without believing it. We learn how to not get lost there, or how not to drown in it. And we learn how to use it in the service of the practice, rather than, suffering on account of it. And one thing that's so wonderful about the metta practice, just the way we hold whatever unwholesome states might be there that are full of ego, acknowledge, hold with a friendly kindness, and then re-incline to metta. That's the basic way of working with all of this.
E quindi nel Metta Sutta vediamo come di fronte a tutti questi stati anche difficili li accogliamo, li riconosciamo, li accogliamo e poi incliniamo nuovamente alla metta.
In inclining to metta, what we're doing is actually something quite powerful, because we're turning the heart and mind and all of our attention away from the ego to others. And so it gives us a means to find that beautiful place in the heart where we're not just thinking about ourselves, but we're including others as well. This is one reason I really love the metta practice as a concentration practice, as compared to other concentration practices, because it develops the concentration, but also develops an inclusive, friendly mind and heart that isn't all about me. One thing I've noticed in myself, and I've seen in other people doing other kinds of concentration practices, perhaps focusing here or on a colored disc, is you can get into an incredible bubble of self-centeredness. But if you're doing the metta practice for the sake of concentration, you can't get away with that. It just doesn't go in that direction. So the metta practice opens out from me to us. It's just the best. So then, in the sutta, following on from that, there's a list of simple virtues that are really very supportive of the practice. I don't want to talk about all of them, but I'm choosing my favorites. First is contentment. It's the very first one in that second verse. So, Santusako cha subarocha, content with little and easily maintained. Please remember, of course, this is addressed to monks who go out on alms round and, So it's basically saying, don't be demanding of the people supporting you. Mm. And the polar opposite of this is being demanding or entitled. Contentment is mentioned in the Dhammapada as the greatest wealth. Because when you think of it, it's very true. When you're content with what you have, it's such a peaceful state. And our culture doesn't do contentment very well, I have to say. The whole economic system is based on, always needing something new. You get a brand new phone and suddenly, 6 months out, it's like, oh no, this is old, I need a new one. Because you see some advertisement for the newest version. And this is something, some realm that I have never inhabited, but I kind of observe from a far distance, in a puzzled way, fashion. And how it's like some people don't wear the same dress twice. It's crazy. And people who care about what other people think, you're never good enough. You always have to keep up with the neighbors. They get a new car, you need a new car. They paint their house, you have to paint your house. That whatever it is. Most of us probably don't inhabit worlds like that, but we marinate in this culture, and it really affects us. There can be a restlessness in the mind that comes from thinking about our life and what we need and what needs to be better, and it's just, we cannot rest, especially if we're coming from a place of not feeling good enough. You know, that we can really fall into this discontent that may not even be about material things. It may be about the practice, for example. And discontent can be projected out into various realms of our life, where we need this, we need that. Maybe it's food, for example. We have to have a certain kind of food. I have to say, working as a cook in a big retreat center is a really interesting exercise in seeing where this can go in the human mind. You see all varieties. And when there's anxiety in particular, fear can really cause the mind to go crazy with discontent. So, for example, before the 3-month retreat, there are always yogis coming into the kitchen to speak with the cooks. Well, in that case, 20 years ago, speak with us about what they had to have. This, in spite of the fact that the retreat center sends everybody a thing saying, this is what we can offer you and this is what we can't. And in terms of special food in the kitchen, simple food, that's what you get, or you get what's offered. So everybody knew that we couldn't do special things, but they still came into the kitchen to ask for those things. And what's very clear in a situation like that, looking at it from the outside, is they're freaking out about beginning a 3-month retreat, and they're projecting that onto the food. So one thing that helps internally, if you find yourself needing something with a real energy, is noticing the difference between whether you actually physically need it or you just really want it. And is there something else going on underneath that to fuel all of that drama? I've noticed on retreats how sometimes, especially in a really long retreat, like 8 months or a year, I get into something that I feel like I need. One long retreat, it was my pot of tea after breakfast. I would go back to my room and I'd make this little pot of tea and I'd just have this moment of, that I needed that. And one day Vivekananda asked me how much tea I was drinking. Busted.
Busted?
Busted means arrested. You know, he caught me. He could tell by what I was reporting that the mind was just, the practice was going really well, but there was just a little too much energy there. It was, the mind was moving in a way that it didn't need to. And he asked, how much tea are you drinking? So I told him, and he said, cut it out. And I was so surprised when I stopped doing it that actually I hadn't really needed to do that. It was just really nice. I was quite content not doing it. And this goes towards that second half of the sentence, easily maintained. It speaks to simplicity. We actually don't need much. We need very little. One thing that I've learned this not so much from retreats, but I've learned it from walking the Camino, where you carry what you have on your back. And you know, you don't want to carry much more than about 8 kilos. So what do you carry? You don't need much. So here on retreat particularly, it's very easy to live a simple life. And what comes with contentment and simplicity is this natural upwelling of gratitude. And this is so beautiful when it happens. We really rest back in what we have and we realize how lucky we are. In a place such as this, which is so beautiful and which supports us so beautifully, it's really easy to connect with that. And a couple of people have really beautifully expressed this in the meetings with me of how grateful they are and how that supports the practice. So, contentment, simplicity, and then the next piece. I'm going to rush through it because time is almost up, but it's important. Not doing too much. Here, we don't have that many responsibilities. And even in life, because this applies in life as well, yes, we have responsibilities, but we do a lot that is extra. And what this line points to, not doing too much, means not distracting ourselves. Not getting involved with this and that and, things that we see that we want to do, or not getting involved, certainly not getting involved with our telephone. Not getting distracted by Oh, there are all sorts of small things that we suddenly need to do when we're on retreat. You know, it's that walking period after lunch and we think, but I have to wash my socks. Or I want to go for a walk instead. You know, and it's not coming from actually needing to balance the practice. We just want to go for a walk. Or we clean and reorganize our room for the third time today. This also has a cultural root for all of us, because our culture is one of distraction. And being busy seems to be a virtue. I don't know if this happens in Italian, but certainly in American English, you greet an old friend you haven't seen for a while. Hey, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so busy. That's the first thing that comes out of our mouth. I'm so busy. We fill that empty space inside with busyness. And we do it out there, and we do it in here too. It's not so easy to see in a 10-day retreat, but if you're somewhere on retreat for like 8 months, you really see the cycles of this. You see how when there's a time when you're just feeling a little uncomfortably empty, that's when you start getting busy and doing things. I've gone through periods of time trying to organize the trash at the monastery. I wasn't on retreat at the time, but during COVID time, there were not very many of us at the monastery. And out of anxiety, I took this whole like 1/4 or 1/3 of the monastery, and that was my sweeping job. Distracting myself from feeling. And we do this on retreat. So watch the mind. If you want to do something other than sitting, walking, eating, yogi job, ask yourself, where is this coming from? Am I making myself busy to avoid something? So, and then the very last bit, well, the first 2 lines of the 3rd verse, is the part of that first section that points directly to explicit Sila. So he would not do even the slightest thing that others who are wise would speak against. This speaks to something I want to begin the talk tomorrow with, because it's much longer, but I'll say what I'm going to talk about at the beginning. Hiri Ottappa, which are spoken of as the twin guardians of the world. Out of self-respect and respect for our teachers and those who we revere, we behave as meticulously as we can. That's the short version. I'll say a few more words about it next time. So this first section of the sutta speaks about all of these things that can be explored in the practice in a really refined way. And it's the refined aspects of these qualities that are important to observe in the practice. Because nobody here is, you're all practicing sincerely, reasonably diligently, some of you very diligently. Nobody here is expressing the opposites of these in a coarse way. There's basic contentment and simplicity and not doing too much, but in a refined way, and only you will know this. It's not obvious from the outside, but in the refined way, this is where we can polish the practice. And the quality of heart that comes to the surface with all of these is actually quite beautiful. It's tenderness. It's care for ourselves and each other. And tenderness is it's one of these paradoxes in the Dhamma. It brings so much power to the metta, but it's so soft. It really brings us to wholeness. It balances all of those things that cause discontent and needing and grasping. It balances harshness. It balances force through us. So I'm very sorry. First to you, Donatella, for making you work long. And thank you for your kind attention. I have gone over. So Paolo, if you could please ring the bell 10 minutes later than normal. And let's just all sit quietly and let all those words just settle.